Welcome back to Barneyjmusic. My name is Barney. I'm a classical composer and founder and director of Barneyjmusic. In today's episode, I'm going to explain what a musical panic attack is going to sound and look like. And no, I do not want you to go into a panic attack, but my goal here is to show you the music of HELPISONTHEWAY, my first orchestral work, but through a story. So again, that was from HELPISONTHEWAY for orchestra in 5 movements by Barney B. Amen. And that was the 4th movement, which is the Terror. So this Terror movement, it starts off with the double basses and the cellos, which I'll show in just a second. One thing to note in this melody, it goes up and it goes down. Let me play it slower. So do you hear how it kind of goes up and goes down? And then that just repeats and repeats for what seems like miles and miles and ages. So it gives this feeling of like we're not going anywhere. There's movement, but the movement doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to play just the basses, just that kind of bottom without the melody that comes on top, and just notice that aspect. Lord have mercy. Now, I hope their fingers can get tired, but it's not so bad. Okay. Now, on top, listen to what we add. In French, I lived 5 years in France, in Paris. We would call them les frappes. Okay, so it's okay. And now it would be a good moment. I'd like to look at the musical score. If you cannot read music, this is exactly for you. This is intended for people who can't read music. I'm just going to explain certain key elements that I would like to bring to the attention of the general public. So on the score, it has the title of the piece, HELPISONTHEWAY for orchestra, the name of the movement, which is the Terror, of course, my name, Barney B. Johnson. But what I want to bring your attention to is on the left-hand side, we have the names of the instruments. So I'll read them off for you. So we have 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons. And notice how they seem to form a group, because afterwards there's a bit of a space, and then we have more instruments. Okay. So we have 4 horns, 2 trumpets, 3 trombones, tuba, timpani, percussion 1, percussion 2. Something controversial, actually, is technically you're supposed to put a space, because here I have the horns, the trumpets, the trombones and tuba, which are the brass instruments. They tend to be louder. They're made of brass, okay, kind of often used for fanfare. And then there should be a space, and then the percussion. The percussion are typically instruments that are struck, or drums especially, wind chimes. So I have the timpani, which is a tuned percussion. It's a tuned drum, kind of can get a rumbling sound. And the percussion 1, percussion 2, it's just a general term. It's just one person who has to, I might ask them to use a cowbell. I might ask them to play marimba. So the percussion, they wear multiple hats, okay? After that, we have the strings, okay? So we see violin 1, violin 2, viola, violoncello, and double bass. A violoncello is just the formal name for cello. We typically just call it cello, and double bass, you could just call bass. So we talked about how the bottom theme, there's something it creates a sense of panic over time, because it just goes up, goes down, goes up, and it just never changes. Have you ever had that, where it's just like life doesn't seem to change, it's just the same, and a feeling of dread, you s'installe, as they say in French, a feeling of dread kind of enters your spirit, and nothing changes. But we do have something that comes in on top that seems to add some flavor at first. Listen carefully. So let's look at the musical score, okay? So this original idea number 1, we're going to see at the bottom. So look at the bottom, and we see it says cello and double bass, okay? So again, if you can't read music, no worries. You notice that all the other instruments are resting, okay? You'll see they have nothing except this little black mark, which basically means be quiet. So it's interesting to be quiet. We have to tell people to be quiet, okay? And we see the cellos and the basses are going to be playing, so it's going to be something kind of a rumbling feeling. Notice I have a couple markings like light, okay? Now, why did I put that? Probably I was concerned that it would be too muddy, okay? Because this is definitely a very low register. That's on the double bass and the cellos. Now, one thing to note is on a piano, our perception of low and high is different for those instruments. So here on the piano, that may not sound as low as this. Right? It sounds higher. However, it's the instrument it's used for that matters. So in this case, it's the cellos. And it's going to sound low. So with the cellos here, and the double bass is here, we're going to have a kind of rumbling quality or something kind of murmuring, but I've tapered it off by putting light so they don't get too thick. And I also notice I said 2 basses only. So on this piece, there's going to be 3 to 4 basses. So for the opening, just 2. So I just want to point that out to show that a composer is hearing very, very at a level of finesse that you may not be aware of when you just hear the live performance. Now, we also have a new event. So where does this new event occur? Well, we saw the double bass and the cellos, and if you can't read music, it's okay. You should be able to at least see that there's this black stuff here, okay? It continues. So we have to look for something new. So we're on this first page, and then we see in the third measure. So we have measure 1, measure 2. Think of a measure as like a cell. It's just to help organize. Then the third measure, we have a new event. Okay, and what instruments are playing? Well, we already went over that if an instrument is going to not be playing, it's going to be silent, it's basically there's nothing written except this little black little thing in the middle of the measure. Okay, so looking at the string, so that's at the bottom, we see the cellos and the basses, of course, are occupied with. We see that the violas have nothing, violin 2, 1, okay, so we have to move all the way up, and then we get to the trumpets that have something as well as the horns. So first I'd like to look at the woodwinds, okay? That's what we call these kind of lighter instruments, like the oboes. So the oboes have this. But of course, that's not the music, it's this. So who fills out the rest of the notes? So we have the oboes on these two notes, and then the bassoons, which I don't even know how to describe the sound of the bassoon. You have to come live to hear it. The bassoons are here. But notice without the oboes, it sounds weird. We have either with just the oboes, or we have just the bassoons. But music is not, individuals, it's everyone together. So this is what it sounds like. Now we also have the horns and the trumpets. But before we look at that, I just want to bring to your attention that this sound here, we call a chord. I don't want to get into what is a chord. There's some of this vocabulary, it's just easier to assimilate. It's kind of like imagine going to school and someone trying to explain what is the, THE. No, if certain things, it's just you have to just use them in context, and then there's no need to explain it. Other things I do want to explain. Okay, so this is a chord here, kind of collection of notes, and listen slowly. I'll play individually. I'll play the bassoons from the bottom up, and then I'll add the oboes. Okay, so how many notes? Well, it's 4. And even if your ear can perceive that, you should be able to use your brain in a way that's logical. So sometimes the ear doesn't work, you have to use the logic, because it says in the musical score 2 oboes and 2 bassoons. And I also play them slowly. Okay. Now on a piano, this is all we hear. However, in the orchestra, it's not all we're going to hear. This is the sound we're going to hear, but it's not just the oboes and the bassoons. We also see below, we see the horns and the trumpets. So let me play the French horns. There's 2 of them that are playing. Now, be careful. There are 4 French horns in the score, but only 2 are playing right now. So let me play the French horns, and let me play the trumpets. Let me play the French horns and trumpets together. Huh. Does that sound familiar? Let me play the oboes and the bassoons together. Now I'm going to play what's going on in the brass. Well, it's the same thing. Okay, so the thing to understand is that music for orchestra is simpler than you may think. Okay, so when we're looking at the musical score, we might see 8 instruments, right? We see 2 trumpets, we see 2 horns being used, 2 bassoons, 2 oboes. So 8 performers, 8 people, 8 players, right? However, our ear is only going to hear 4 different notes. Okay? This phenomena of notes being repeated, so we have, and the same phenomena being repeated in the brass, is what we call doubling. Okay, now that's actually a technical term, so I don't expect you to do that much with it, but I think the concept is important to understand, is that, we have many different instruments, but a lot of them are doing the same things. Now, why would that be the case? We already have this in the bassoons and oboes. Why do I have to repeat it in the French horns and the trumpets? Well, it's about volume, The woodwinds aren't always very loud, okay? So sometimes we repeat the same information in other instruments, or aka doubling, to give more volume. One other thing to notice is I put next to the French horns and the trumpets, it says mutes. So what that is inside the bell of the instrument, kind of they have kind of a bell and the sound protrudes out. You insert this kind of metallic device to kind of choke the sound. So, and this, I need a live orchestra to show you, or live instruments. But so instead of being too loud like this, they're going to be more like the trumpet and the trumpets and the horns are going to be a bit, not necessarily softer, but there's a choked quality. But again, that's hard to perceive. So we have 8 instruments playing here, but only 4 different notes because of doubling. But our ear, probably when you first heard it, you heard this. You didn't hear A, because it wasn't done, the music was not played in as successive notes, but also you heard the summation of these 4 individual notes. And so instead of this, you heard this. Okay? So really, you may have heard just one event, even though that one event was composed of 4 smaller notes. Does that make sense? Please, if that is not clear, please let me know down below in the comments, and I would be very happy to clarify that, because, I think oftentimes there's a disconnect between professional musicians and the general public. I'm in la-di-da-di land, and it makes sense to me. So if that is not clear, do not feel embarrassed or like, oh, why don't I'm not, we want to end that tyranny of people feel uncomfortable, or they feel like, oh, well, I don't know. This needs to be made accessible. Okay, this is beautiful music, and we want the general public to appreciate it. So if something like this, feels a little bit, maybe try rewatching it. But if it's still not clear, it may not be you. It may have been the explanation. Okay. So we have 4 different notes. However, we talked about that these 4 notes form one event. And let me play from the beginning. So how many events are taking place in the music? Now, it depends how you look. On the one hand, there's just music happening, right? So one event, Help Is On The Way for orchestra, by Barney B. 5 movements, but we're in the 4th movement. So you could say, well, there's only one event, okay, and everything's contributing to the whole. That is an acceptable answer. You could also say that there's 8 kind of mini events going on, because we have the winds doubled with the brass. But that would not be fully accurate, because we still have this in the bottom. And how many instruments are playing that? Well, we already explained. It's the double bass and the cello. And if you forget, you can just look at the score. You don't have to be able to read it, but you should be able, hopefully by now, to see that there's stuff going on in this layer attached to the cellos, or the violoncellos, as well as the double bass, okay? So if I was to ask how many events are taking place, yes, you could say just one event. I like that answer. Or if you want to be very precise, like the Germans, they love that precision, right? I'm half German, so I can say it. You could say maybe there's 8 plus 2, because we have this, okay, plus the bottom, okay, which is the double bass. So 8 plus 2 is 10. But I would not fully agree. I think technically you could say that from a legal standpoint, but I don't think the listener and I'm very obsessed with how the listener perceives. I don't think that's how they perceive the music. I think the listener is going to perceive that there are two events. Okay? There's the rumbling, and then there's these les frappes, as they say in French, like these attacks. In addition, notice that these attacks up top, they kind of change, right? Then there's a rest. I don't know if you could hear it with my playing, but I tried to do a diminuendo, like it gets softer, right? So there is some movement happening, okay, in that, okay? And then we have what's going on the bottom. So I would say the listener is going to experience this music. Probably when they're at the concert of Help Us on the Way for Orchestra, I hope that it just is like a magical experience. They're not analyzing it like this, okay? But this is just to build your appreciation. I would say that the listener is going to perceive, if you were to stop it and, analyze it, they're going to perceive two different things taking place, okay?